Okay, it looks like we're recording and it looks like most everybody's in from the waiting room. So welcome to the Evergreen reportable event, provider follow-up and death and mortality review training. My name is Leslie Miska. For those of you who have not met me yet, I am the Office of Aging and Disability Services Information Services Manager, and I'll be leading today's training session. During today's training session, we will cover the following topics. Oh, next slide, Nikki. Sorry about that. Introduction to Evergreen, the reportable event form, the provider follow-up, and the death and mortality review form. Next slide, please, Nikki. Prior to this training, you should have watched the Evergreen microlearning videos. If you have not had a chance to watch them yet, or if you'd like to review them again, the brief videos are available on our Evergreen project website at maine.gov/dhhs/EIS/Evergreen. The videos, and you'll want to go to the training page for those. The videos provide training for the following topics: search, which is an introduction to Evergreen and the search process and how to access the person dashboards or record, staff, locations, and organizations. Dashboards, which there are two different dashboards in Evergreen. One is for you and the other is for the person dashboard. The person record, which is where all of the demographic and personal information about the individual are captured and maintained. Health information, which is a comprehensive collection of all of the information like diagnoses, allergies, treatments, medications, health insurance, etc. Queries and notifications, which are tools that will help you manage your outstanding work or actions that you need to take in the system. Progress notes, which is a way for you to document notes within the person's record. Attachments, which are important documents that can be uploaded to the person's record to supplement the information that's captured in Evergreen. And please note that we will not be covering any of these topics today, so you will want to review the microlearnings if you haven't already, or if you'd like that refresher. Next slide, please, Nikki. Participants have been added to this training session in listener mode, therefore your line is muted. But we do want to receive your questions and be able to respond to them after the slides have been demoed. So we ask that you use the Q&A icon that's in your Zoom window menu. Depending on how big your window is, it may be hidden under the ellipses, the three dots, but it should be in your menu on your Zoom window. And you can enter those questions at any time, and I will answer as many of them as we receive, and we should have plenty of time for all the questions today. In the circumstance that we can't get through all of the questions, we certainly will respond to all of those and post the answers on our webpage under our FAQs. Next slide, please, Nikki. So the first thing that we want to cover is how Evergreen is set up. There are two separate sections of the Evergreen system. There's a section for the Adult Protective Services Program and their APS reports. And then there's the section that's called the Evergreen Person Record. The person record is what we will be training on today. We won't be going over the Adult Protective Services side of Evergreen. That launched back in June of 2020 and has been in use by that program since then. However, the reason that we're sharing this information is it's important to know that both sections of Evergreen share the person record, which contains the relevant person details like the demographics, including identifiers such as the A number, social security number, all the health information, and much, much more. Because Evergreen is, the Evergreen person record is shared, the Adult Protective Services and Public Guardianship Conservatorship staff will also have access to view and edit the data captured in the person record. Next slide, please, Nikki. Some of the benefits of the Evergreen system include self-service help features including the ability to reset your own password, which is very exciting. System-generated notifications for reportable events, provider follow-ups, and death and mortality reviews. The ability to run role-specific queries to see what outstanding actionable items you have, as well as some reports. An enhanced person record with centralized data capture, for example, history records, health information records, all captured and maintained at the person record level. The display of common data within forms rather than having to recapture that data across every single form. Examples would include like program classification, the person's address, diagnoses, different things like that. And standardized data capture. For example, we will have certain required fields. We will do field level validations. There will be form workflows and business rules that will help to standardize the data capture. Next slide, please, Nikki. My dashboard is the first page a staff member or user will see after they log in. My dashboard showcases a search tool next to the Evergreen logo in the white bar up at the top. This is the persistent navigation or the navigational toolbar, and there are role-specific tiles in the center of the page here. So for the reportable event provider, the tiles are the left-hand most tile, the announcements tile, which has an orange background. That will always be there. That's for every system user. And this is where my staff or our vendor can have messages posted that everybody that's logging into the system needs to be aware of, such as planned system outages for maintenance and things like that, or office closures. The next tile is the messages tile. This is a feature similar to email, but it's contained within the Evergreen system and can be used for communicating with other system users, such as the community case manager, for example. So if you're entering a reportable event and you need to communicate with the community case manager directly, you can create a new message and find that user and message back and forth with them inside of the system rather than outside of the system in your email. And the My Notes tile, which is similar to the sticky notes feature on your smartphone device or notepad or something like that. Essentially, it just allows you to start capturing a quick note. And then certain users in the system have the ability to create progress notes. And then these sticky notes can be promoted up to a progress note if your user role allows for that. Next slide, please, Nikki. The reportable event form should be filled out pursuant with State of Maine Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Aging and Disability Services, Reportable Events System Rule, which is 14-197 CMR Chapter 12. Next slide, please, Nikki. To report an event that meets the criteria outlined in the reportable events rule, the user should navigate to the person record, click on the Forms and Plans icon in the left-hand green primary navigation menu. I've circled that icon in red, and the background appears white for that icon because I was clicked into that page when I took this screenshot. This takes you, clicking on this icon takes you to the All Forms list page, which is grayed out in the background of this screenshot. And in the upper left-hand corner of that list page is a plus new form button, which I've also circled in red. This is what you will click on in order to get the pop-up modal that you see in the center of the page right now, in the center of the screenshot. This pop-up modal will allow you to create a form. And in this case, we want to create a reportable event form. So we're going to select the category of incident reporting. And then under form, we'll select reportable event. And then we'll click next from here to move to step 2, where we will confirm that we are sure we want to create this form. Next slide, please, Nikki. Upon creating the form, the system will navigate the user into the reportable event form on the reportable event tab. So we are on the reportable event tab when I took this screenshot, and you can tell because it's white and it blends right into the white menu for this form. There's another tab here, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it looks a little bit darker peach color, and that is because we're not clicked onto that. That's the provider follow-up tab. Like many other forms in Evergreen, the reportable event form will be in the status of in progress right after you complete it and you get navigated in there. And the completion requirements will display an orange dotted circle indicating that the required fields for submission have not yet been populated. All sections of the form will be defaulted to collapsed, and you can either scroll and expand each section manually using the caret icon to the left of the header. So in this screenshot, I circled the little caret beside overview. So you can click on it once and it will expand that section, and you can click on it again and it will collapse that. Or you can use that expand all icon that's in the form menu in the center of the screen, and it will expand all of them at the same time. You can use the toggle in the upper right-hand corner of the content area to open your quick scroll menu. And the quick scroll menu will display all sections of the form. So for the reportable event form, those sections are overview, incident, reporter, witness, participant, witnesses and participants, notifications, incident categories, and incident category types. Clicking on a section name in the quick scroll menu will automatically bring you to that section without having to manually scroll. Next slide, please, Nikki. To populate the form, you will navigate to the section that you want to edit. When you're there, you will hover over that section and you should see a pencil icon appear. Clicking anywhere in that section will open a pop-up edit modal like the one that's shown in this screenshot. Many of the reportable event fields are consistent with the EIS version of the form. However, there are a few new fields that have been added to more closely align with the CMS critical incident reporting requirements and to make it easier to identify trends in reporting. The incident section of the form contains the report title, the incident discovery date, incident start and end dates, and times. If the discovery date is more than 1 business day from the incident start date, then you will be required to provide a reason for the delay of reporting. I have included a zoomed in box with a thick black border to show you all of the pick list selections for the reason for delay field. If you choose other, like I did in this example, you will also be required to describe the other reason for the delay in reporting. Incident start time and end times are also new fields. If the exact times are unknown, you should populate the fields with the closest possible time and then check the "is this approximate" checkbox to indicate that it is an approximate time. Next slide, please, Nikki. If the incident discovery date was more than 1 business day after the incident start date, then you will be required to answer the question, why was the past incident just reported? This pick list contains 3 selections, one of which is other. If you select other, you will be required to provide a description of the other reason why the past incident was just reported. This section also includes a new frequency of occurrence pick list with the options of first occurrence, multiple occurrences, and continuing pattern. You should select the value based on your knowledge. Therefore, if this is the first occurrence that you're aware of, you should select that option, even though there may have been other occurrences that you did not know about. Under the frequency of occurrence is a 10,000 character incident detail description text field. This is where you'll describe the event. After that is the 10,000 character description of the immediate response. Next is the incident location pick list with 8 common selections, which I've shown here with the black border, plus an option of other. If none of the other selections are accurate, you can choose other. And as with other fields, if you choose that option, you will be required to describe the other incident location. Next slide, please, Nikki. Once you've indicated the incident location, you will be required to provide a yes or no response to the question, is this a waiver-funded location, and provide the address of the incident. Next, you will find some more new fields, including whether emergency services were involved, and if yes, which type or types. This is a multi-select, so you can select as many emergency services as were involved. Next slide, please, Nikki. In addition to emergency services, we will also capture whether law enforcement was present, and if yes, why. If yes, why? The pick list options include 4 common reasons plus a selection of none of the above. In this screenshot, I have included a zoomed in list of the selections to the right of the field. It's the top box with the thick black border. These happen to be charged with a crime, subject of an investigation, victim of a crime, planned strategy / unplanned crisis intervention, part of an investigation, or none of the above. There is also a yes or no question about whether the incident resulted in an emergency room visit, as well as a yes or no question about whether there is any suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Please note that a yes response to suspected abuse, neglect, and exploitation does not exempt the reporter from their mandated reporting responsibilities under the Adult Protective Services Act, and therefore a call should still be made to the Adult Protective Services hotline. This message is also displayed in yellow on the screen as a reminder. The final questions in this section include an attestation checkbox indicating that the data enterer understands that a 30-day provider follow-up and internal review must be completed, and that they will notify the responsible party if that isn't themselves. The responsible party options are displayed in the screenshot in the zoomed in box with the thick black border at the bottom of the screenshot and to the right of that question. These options include work support provider, community support provider, home support provider, agency group home provider, shared living provider, or case manager. Once the required fields have been populated, you can use the Save button to commit these answers to the database and begin populating the next section of the form. Next slide, please, Nikki. The next section of the form is the reporter section. The first question is reporter type, which includes the options of contact, staff member, person, self, or other. If contact is selected, the system will present a list of person record contacts for the data enterer to choose from. If staff member is selected, the system will present a list of assigned staff members, such as a case manager, care coordinator, or public guardianship representative to choose from. If person is selected, the system will pre-populate the reporter name field with the person's name and contact information. If self is selected, the system will populate the reporter name with the logged in data enterer's name and contact information. If other is selected, the system will present a set of text fields which can be manually populated with the reporter's name and contact information. Next slide, please, Nikki. In this example, I selected self, and the system auto-populated the name, title, email, and phone number from my user profile. Since I am the user of the system, I was then presented with a pick list of the locations that are set up under the organization that my user account is tied to, so that I could select my location and have the system auto-populate my location address. The last question in this section is what the reporter's involvement was. The available options shown in the box with the black border are witness, participant, or hearsay. Next slide, please, Nikki. After the reporter section comes the witnesses and participants section. This section makes use of another new field type, which is the multi-add list. A multi-add list will appear as a green action button with the plus add field label. In this case, it's plus add witnesses participants, which will open a modal with the field set for capturing the data for the first witness or participant. Once you've completed the required fields and you save that entry, you can add another, and you can add as many witnesses or participants as you need to. When I took this screenshot, I had already clicked on the plus add witnesses participants button, which popped up the modal displayed in the center of the screen. The first question in this add modal asks for the relationship of the individual to the person this reportable event is being created for. The options include contact, staff member, and person, which will all behave the same way that the reporter selections did. Or you can choose another individual receiving services, which won't require any other details except for the individual's involvement. Or you could select reporter, which will also display details from the reporter section of the reportable event form. You can choose self, which will populate with the logged in data enters details, or you can select other, which will offer a set of text fields for capturing the other person's details. Next slide, please, Nikki. In this example, I chose staff member and selected the assigned case manager, who happens to be Jesse CCM, from the pick list provided. The system then auto-populated the title of community case manager. The last field in the witness participant field set is what the individual's involvement was, either a witness or a participant. Once you have populated these fields, you can save and add another witness or participant. Or if there are no more witnesses or participants, you can move on to the next section. Next slide, please, Nikki. The next section of the form is notifications, the notification section. This section includes a yes or no question about whether the person's family was notified, as well as a yes, no, not applicable question about whether the guardian was notified. If no is selected, you will be required to provide a description about why the guardian was not notified. Next slide, please, Nikki. The incident categories section leverages the dual list field type, which displays all of the available options in the box on the left and all of the selected categories in the box on the right. To move the categories, you simply click the checkbox to the left of the option you want to select and use the arrow buttons in the middle of the two boxes to move the checked selection. If the category is in the available list and you want to move it to the selected list, you would check the box and click the right facing arrow. If you had already moved the category to the selected box by accident and you wanted to move it out, you would check the box to the left of the category and use the left facing arrow to move it back to the available box. There are a total of 17 incident categories. 16 of the categories align with 14-197 CMR Chapter 12, which are 2A I through XVI of the reportable event rule. The 17th category aligns with 14-197 CMR Chapter 5, Section 5.07-2 B10. And this is rights violation waiting for approved plan. This is a new category that does not exist in EIS. This additional rights violation category should only be used when waiting for an approved plan. This will prevent the daily reports from sending notifications to the Disability Rights Main. Depending on the category selected, you will be presented with any corresponding custom questions. In this example, I selected the categories of death and rights violation waiting for approved plan. The system auto-selected emergency department visit for me as I had answered yes to the question, did the incident result in a visit to the emergency room under the incident details section of the form. Custom questions or incident category subtypes will automatically appear as a subsection of the form under the category section once your category selections have been made. Next slide, please, Nikki. The next several slides will describe the custom questions associated with each category. There are 3 categories which do not have any custom questions. Those are death, medical treatment other than hospital, rights violation waiting for an approved plan. There are 6 categories with a single custom question. Those are emergency department visit, hospital admission planned/unplanned, law enforcement intervention, transportation accident, physical assault or altercation, and rights violation. The custom question for each of these categories is displayed on the right side of this slide. Next slide, please, Nikki. The other 8 categories have multiple custom questions. The questions associated with suicide threat and suicide attempt are displayed on the right-hand side of this slide. The custom questions associated with medication error, serious injury, lost or missing person, emergency restraint, dangerous situation, and physical plant disaster will be covered in the next 5 slides. Next slide, please, Nikki. Medication error includes 3 custom questions. If other is selected from the reason medication error occurred, pick list, you will be required to populate a 4th field describing the other reason. In addition to that question, you will need to select an option from the pick list of who made the medication error. And you can select as many options as apply to the question, did the medication error result in any of the following? If you select one or more options under that question, the option of none of the above will become grayed out and not selectable. To select none of the above, you will need to uncheck all other selections. Next slide, please, Nikki. Lost or missing person has 4 single select questions that are displayed in this screenshot, 3 of which are simple yes, no, unknown pick lists, and then the length of time question, which includes options for less than 1 hour, 1 to 8 hours, 8 to 24 hours, or more than 24 hours. Dangerous situation has 2 single select questions and the alert message highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the screenshot to let the data enterer know that they should also select the category of serious injury if the dangerous situation resulted in one. The question about who is at risk includes options of person, other, or others, and both. And the question about the type of situation includes selections of arson, hostage taking, self-injurious behavior such as cutting, headbanging, biting, etc. Next slide, please, Nikki. Serious injury has 2 multi-select questions about the type of injury and where the person received treatment, as well as a single select pick list for the cause of the injury. The choices in the pick list are accident, pre-existing condition, negligence, self-inflicted, or unknown. Next slide, please, Nikki. The physical plant disaster category includes 2 multi-select questions with the choices displayed in the screenshot. If you select the option of other from either of the questions, you will be presented with and required to populate an other text field as well. Next slide, please, Nikki. The emergency restraint category has 6 questions and 3 conditional questions based on your responses. You will be required to select a type of restraint from the options of personal holding, chemical restraint, or blocking. If you select personal holding, which I did in this example, you will be required to answer the questions displayed in this screenshot. The choices for the type of personal holding include floor, sitting, or standing. If you choose sitting or standing, you will be required to indicate whether it was a 1-person or 2-person. You will also be asked to provide the restraint method used with choices of safety care, CPI, TCI, NAPI, MANDT, or unknown. Next will be a simple yes, no, not applicable question about whether the restraint was outside of the approved plan. Then a single select question of whether this was a single restraint or multiple restraints. If you choose multiple, you will be able to add multiple restraint times, but if you choose single, the system will only allow one restraint time to be added. You'll click on the plus add restraint time button, which is circled in red at the bottom of this screenshot. You will be presented with two fields, one for restraint time and one for restraint start time and one for restraint end time. The system will then auto-calculate the duration and total restraint times for you based on the start and end time. And if you have multiple across all of them, it will give you the total. The last question in this section for these emergency restraint type is a yes/no question about whether the restraint resulted in a serious injury. If the answer is yes, the system will display a yellow highlighted alert message telling you that you should also select the category of serious injury. Next slide, please, Nikki. Once you have populated all of the required fields, your completion requirements icon will change to a set of green check marks like the one displayed here. To complete the reportable event form, you will click on the status dropdown and select the complete option. This change in status will trigger the system to send notifications to the assigned case manager or care coordinator, crisis staff, and quality assurance team. If there was a category of rights violation, it will also notify Disability Rights Maine. And if the answer to whether there is a suspicion of abuse, neglect, or exploitation was yes, then it will also notify the Adult Protective Services program so that they are expecting a call for the report. Next slide, please, Nikki. Upon receipt of the notification, the case manager or care coordinator will need to navigate to the reportable event form to review it. And then they will need to acknowledge that their review has been completed by clicking on the status dropdown and selecting the confirm status, which I've circled here. Any reportable event that has not been confirmed within 1 business day will start triggering a daily notification to the case manager or care coordinator and their supervisor each day until the reportable event has been reviewed and confirmed. Next slide, please, Nikki. One 30-day follow-up form is required for each distinct event. The provider follow-up form is added to the provider follow-up tab of the reportable event and can be submitted at the same time that the reportable event is completed or any time after it has been submitted and within 30 days per the reportable event rule. Next slide, please, Nikki. When you first click on the Provider Follow-Up tab, you will see a screen that looks like this with a message indicating that no provider follow-up record exists and with a plus provider follow-up button directly below it. Next slide, please, Nikki. Upon using the plus Add Provider Follow-Up button and adding the follow-up form, you will see a screen that's displayed just like the reportable event form one was. And the status will be in progress. The completion requirements will be not met, indicated by the orange dotted circle, and all of the sections will be defaulted to collapsed. Just like the reportable event tab of this form, you can use the expand all icon to expand all the sections at the same time, or you can manually expand each one at a time using the caret to expand and collapse them. The provider follow-up form also has a toggle icon which can be clicked to display the quick scroll menu of the sections, which for the provider follow-up form are follow-up details, internal review details, remediation action steps, future remediation action steps, and comments. And now I'm going to share my screen and do a live demo showing you how to create the reportable event and add the provider follow-up form. I am in a test environment, so please bear with me. It does take a little bit of time and we may run into some hiccups here, but definitely want to be able to show you a little bit live today. All right, so you would go here to Forms and Plans. You would click this plus new form button. You would select Incident Reporting. You would then scroll down and select Reportable Event. Next, we're sure we want to create this, so we say Save. And just like my screenshot, we are in here. Everything is not filled yet. And you can tell that fields that are required are not filled out because they do have this little orange exclamation mark in front of them. And I do have the edit pencil capability, so I can click anywhere in there and it will pop up the edit modal so I can start filling the form out. You do have your status drop down here, and you can go over here to the provider follow-up, and you can, are we sure we want to add the provider follow-up? Yes, let's continue. And just like the screenshot, it brings me right in here. Everything's defaulted. I can collapse, expand all, and I can start. I have the little pencil icon. I can start populating these. And these are all my fields here. So I'm going to stop sharing and give this back to Nikki for the slides. And on. All right. And so the first section of the provider follow-up will be auto-populated by the system, including the follow-up due date, which I've circled it's sort of grayed out to the left in the background there. So that section just gets pre-populated by the system and it will determine your due date based on 30 days from the create date of the reportable event or submit date of the reportable event. To populate the other sections of the form, you will hover over the section to reveal the edit pencil icon, and then you'll click anywhere within that section to open the edit modal as shown in this screenshot. The internal review section includes a yes, no, unknown question about whether an internal review was conducted. If the answer is yes, you will be required to answer the 4 additional questions displayed on this screenshot. Next slide, please, Nikki. If the answer is no, you will be required to explain why not. If the answer is unknown, no further questions will be required. Next slide, please, Nikki. In the remediation action steps section, you will be asked a yes/no question about whether any immediate action steps were taken to prevent the incident from recurring. If the answer is yes, the plus add remediation action step button will be displayed, which is shown in the zoomed box with the thick black border at the bottom of the screenshot. Upon clicking the button, you will be presented with the remediation action step fields, which are circled in red in this screenshot. To add additional remediation action steps, you will click the plus symbol to the right of that field set. To remove one that has already been added, you will use the minus button. If the answer is no, you will be required to answer the single select question of why remediation action steps were not necessary. Choices for that dropdown include isolated incident, waiting for safety device approval, waiting for behavior management plan, or other. If you select other, you will be required to provide a description of the other reason. Next slide, please, Nikki. The future remediation action steps include all of the same questions as the immediate action steps and are displayed in this screenshot. Next slide, please, Nikki. Once all of the required fields have been populated, the completion requirements icon will display the green check marks. You can then use the status dropdown to set the provider follow-up form to complete. If the provider follow-up still has not been set to complete within 5 days of the due date, so 25 days after the reportable event, the system will automatically trigger a notification to the data enterer, reminding them that it is coming due. Next slide, please, Nikki. When a person passes away, the death and mortality form should also be filled out. Next slide, please, Nikki. To create the death and mortality form, you will navigate to the Forms Plans icon under the person record and click the plus new form button. You will select the incident reporting category and choose death and mortality form. If the date of death has not been added to the person's record, you will receive an error message like the one displayed in this screenshot, indicating that the person date of death is required in order to create the form. If there is no reportable event with a category of death, a separate error message would appear indicating that the reportable event category for death doesn't exist. I'm going to have Nikki stop sharing, and I'm going to do another quick little demo to show you where these items get added. So I've navigated to my person record, Leslie Mortal, and the record, which is the third option down in my person navigation, my green navigation. This is where the date of death gets captured. So you can see here on this record, Leslie Mortal, I already have a date of death entered here, 11/21/2023. However, if I had not entered the date of death, you would see here that there is no date of death entered there, and my person status does not indicate that I am deceased. This person is deceased. I'll give it back to Nikki for the slides. Excellent. Once the reportable event with a category of death has been completed and the date of death has been added to the person record, which has updated the person's status to deceased, the system will allow you to create the form. Upon creation, the system will auto-populate the overview section with the date of death entered on the person record and the date the form was created. There is only one other section of this form that needs to be filled out, which is the death and mortality report. The report questions are displayed in the pop-up modal in the center of this screenshot. The first question asks whether the death was expected or unexpected. The next question is a yes/no question about whether there is a confirmed cause of death. If the answer is yes, then a conditional question will be required to indicate the cause. Choices for the cause of death include natural causes, age-related, complications due to illness or other diagnosis, terminal diagnosis, physician-assisted suicide, suicide completed, homicide, or accidental death. There is a 10,000 character description text box and a few yes, no, unknown, unavailable questions. The question about autopsy status has choices of requested, completed, not requested, unknown, and then there's a final 10,000 character comments field. Next slide, please, Nikki. Once all of the required fields have been populated, the completion requirements will display a green check mark or green check marks. You can then use the status dropdown to select complete. If the form was created in error, the close option can be used to close the form instead of completing it, but that's the only time that close should be used. If there is a reportable event with a category of death and it has been 5 business days since the reportable event was submitted and the death and mortality report is still not completed, the system will notify the death and mortality reviewer to let them know that the report is due in 5 business days. If the same situation exists 9 business days after, a second notification will also be triggered by the system, letting the death and mortality reviewer know that the report is due in 1 business day. Next slide, please, Nikki. This concludes the slides that I have for you. So if you have any questions, please enter those into the Q&A. We'll definitely take questions here. But before we do that, I do want to let you know what comes next. So we do have a training sandbox that is available for people to test around in, play around in, get yourself familiar with the system. We will be sending out logins to that training sandbox within the next week or so. So please bear with us. There are a lot of reportable event users, and several of you have dual roles. So you will be receiving other training. So we don't want to assign out multiple logins. So it will take us a little while, but we will get those logins sent out to you. In the meantime, you can rewatch this recording once it gets posted to our website later this week, or the informational webinars. We did do one on reportable events and progress notes that's already out on our website. You can watch the micro-learning videos if you haven't already watched those. Those are also out on our website under the training page, or you can rewatch all of these things if you've seen them already. You can read through our frequently asked questions on our project website. And all of that stuff can be found at maine.gov/DHHS/EIS/Evergreen. You can also work to tie up loose ends in EIS. So you're going to want to finish any reportable events that are in progress. And if you have any provider follow-ups that are in progress, it's best to get all of those completed by the end of the day on Friday, January 12th, 2024. So by 5 p.m. that day. All of the reportable events that are in the system will migrate, but if they aren't in a complete state, they will be migrated in a complete state into Evergreen, which will mean that you will have to re-enter those if you weren't able to complete them by 5 p.m. on the 12th. So please make sure that you get them completed, or if anything occurs on Friday the 12th, you might want to hold that and enter it on the 16th if you're not going to have time to finish the form by 5 p.m. You can also participate in the question and answer sessions that FEI is going to be holding later in January. And if at any time you have any questions, you can always email those to us at our project website, which is our project email address, which is evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov. And Nikki has been gracious and has added our website to the chat for everybody. So you can grab that there. And we do have several questions in the question and answer. So I'll certainly answer those now. If you think of any as we're going through the questions, please feel free to continue to use that Q&A icon and we'll answer all of them. Heather asks, if someone has a provider that has issues with Evergreen, is there a paper form that can be filled and sent in to get it logged for them? Currently for EIS, we do accept faxed reportable events or mailed in reportable events on paper form. Our incident data specialists enter those on behalf of that individual. That will still exist. We will still allow that to happen, although we strongly encourage people to use the system themselves, especially because of the provider follow-up forms. It's much easier if people have a system account and use the system themselves. But we will still have a mechanism for mailing in or faxing in reportable events. Carol asks, will these slides be available and posted for reference? Yes, great question, Carol. I should have mentioned that when I was talking about next steps, and I totally neglected to say that. Not only will the recording from this session, but also the slide deck will be posted on our website a little bit later this week. We have another one of these sessions as well scheduled, and we will post the recording and slide deck, one slide deck and probably the best recording. We may post both recordings, but still remains to be determined on that. Mary asks, will there be a new reportable event form with the new fields that needs to be completed? I suspect, Mary, you're talking about the paper form. Yes, likely we will need to adapt our existing paper reportable event form. I think Nancy is listening in on this call, and hopefully we can jot down a reminder for ourselves to modify the existing reportable event paper form. Anita asks, if the incident occurred in the community or while providing supports in a person's private residence, is this considered a waiver setting? That's a great question, Anita. I'm not the expert on that subject, so I don't feel comfortable responding to that because I'd hate to give you the wrong information. So we're going to take this question back and we'll post the answer to that on our frequently asked questions on our website. Someone else asks, will the provider system users have the ability to run reports? For example, Sue Freitas sends us the community case management billing reports. Will we be able to do these on our own, or reportable event reports regarding timely follow-ups, et cetera? That's a fabulous question. Yes, Evergreen does offer, depending on your role, Evergreen will offer you the ability to run certain reports. And so for those system users that do the community case management billing, you will be able to run your own report. You will not need to wait for the incident data specialist, Sue, to send those to you any longer. You'll be able to run that yourself. For reportable events, we do have some queries that are available for the reportable event provider to run to let you know if you have reportable events that are still in progress that you need to complete, or ones that are pending provider follow-up. So you'll be able to do that as well. Chris asks, can you add names to the staff drop-down menu if the person is not listed? No, Chris. If you select like person contact or staff member, you won't be able to add to that list. It will only give you what's currently in the system. In order to get another name to show up in the system, they would need to be added as a person contact on the person record, or they would need to be assigned as an assigned staff person. If that's not appropriate, then you should use the other option, and it will allow you to manually key that person's information into the text fields that are presented. Patrick asks if MANT, M-A-N-D-T, or indicates that MANDT isn't one of the restraint system options. It is one of the options, Patrick. MANDT, MANT, is one of the restraint options that you can select from. Chris asks, you can, or states, I guess, you can block 4 times in a 2-hour period for a total restraint time of about 8 seconds, 2 seconds per block. Are you saying that now the multiple restraint time is going to show us 2 hours? No, definitely not, Chris. So if you're restraining multiple times, you will be able to enter each restraint, and you'll be able to enter the amount of time that that restraint lasted. And then the system will take each of your restraints that you added. So if you started at 154 exactly, and you ended at 154 in 2 seconds, and you enter that restraint, and then you do 4 more of those for a total of 8 seconds, you just need to enter the restraint times, the exact times, and then the system will calculate the total amount of time for you. I may have used a bad example of 2 hours, but it will calculate exactly what you've put in there by this down to the second. Tammy asks, if we forget to do a provider follow-up on the reportable event, will we be notified that one has not been done? Yes, well, so there is, Tammy, there is a query that will let you know, and there are reminders, yes, that will go out to the data enterer, that reminding them that the provider follow-up has not been done. Dawn asks, if you are going in at a later date to complete a follow-up, how do you link it to the original reportable event? That's a great question, Dawn. So the provider follow-up lives within your reportable event form. So if you submit the reportable event form, but you don't submit the provider follow-up at the same time, you don't complete the provider follow-up at the same time, rather than going and creating a new form, when you go back in to complete the provider follow-up, you would actually navigate to the person record, go to the forms and plans area, find the reportable event form that you had previously completed but did not add the provider follow-up to, open that reportable event form, click on that provider follow-up tab, and then you'd add the provider follow-up from within that reportable event. That's a great question. Chris asks, can the internal review section be updated? We do this about once a month, so it wouldn't necessarily be done at the time of follow-up. Great question, Chris. I am not sure the answer to that question, so I am certainly going to take that one back and ask some of our reportable event rule subject matter experts on that one. I know it's editable until the provider follow-up is submitted, but I don't think that that helps you in this case because it sounds like you're doing that review. Well, maybe it is. So you could start the provider follow-up form and just wait until your monthly review occurs and then finish the provider follow-up form, because you do have 30 days to submit that. And so if you're doing those internal reviews once a month, you might be able to handle it that way. But I'll take that question back as well, and we'll post an answer on our frequently asked questions. Chris also asks, who does the death and mortality form? In the past, it was the community case manager, not the agency reportable event entry person. Yeah, it will, it could be the community case manager. It could be the death and mortality reviewer themselves. There's a few different roles that have the ability to add the death and mortality form. Karen asks, where can someone download a copy of the Evergreen user guide? Fabulous question, Karen. We are actually still working to finalize the Evergreen user guide. We will plan to send that out to all of our end users before we go live in Evergreen, but it likely won't be until very early in January that we get that finished. Our vendor is helping us refine that, and they've been working on some other training materials. So rest assured, we will get that completed for you before we go live, but it will be a little bit closer to the deploy. Karen also asks, will ICFs in Section 50 be submitting reportable events via Evergreen or continue to use EIS? If you are currently using EIS to submit reportable events, come January 16th, 2024, you will start using Evergreen. So we will create, if you currently have an EIS account and you submit reportable events through that system, we will create an Evergreen account for you, and you will get an automated email, just like all the other end users, letting you know that you now can start using Evergreen on Tuesday, January 16th at 8 a.m. Chris asks, does Evergreen require a specific browser? Also great question. So Evergreen does work in several browsers. However, we do strongly recommend Chrome. That does seem to be the best browser for Evergreen use. However, it should work just fine in Edge, and hasn't been as thoroughly tested, but we also believe that it will work in Safari. Karen asks, will ICFs in Section 50 be entering death and mortality reports via Evergreen or continuing EIS? If you have currently been entering death and mortality reports in EIS, you will do that in Evergreen come January 16th. Lisa asks, will future scheduled trainings be taking up the entirety of the time allotted? There are a number of 3 to 4 hour trainings, and just wanting to make sure I'm accurately scheduled out on my calendar. Great question, Lisa. I was super apologize that this one was a 4-hour block. I expected that there would be a large participant list and lots of questions, and I truly thought that it was going to take me a couple of hours to get through my slides, but it really happened a lot quicker than expected. The 3-hour trainings likely are accurate. The 4-hour trainings are probably overshot and maybe quite a bit. I will also work with our training team to maybe update some of those that are scheduled out for 3 to 4 hours to reduce them based on how this one went. So we will try to make those more accurate. But the ones that are being provided, the technical trainings that are being provided by our vendor that state 3 hours, those truly will be 3 hours. And some of those are maybe 4-hour blocks as well. And like the community case manager ones, the case management ones, those are lengthy and quite meaty. So I think they will take the time that's allotted. Heidi asks, will there be a new reportable event form issued to include some of the newly required information, such as event address? Yes, Heidi, we will work to modify the paper version of our reportable event form. Lisa asks, will case managers have view access to the APS notes in Evergreen for our clients who have open cases in APS? No. The Adult Protective Services reports forms are protected and separate from the system, and current EIS users that are not part of the Adult Protective Services program will not have access to that portion of the system. Steph asks, or actually wants to give a reminder to folks who fax in reportable events that you also need to fax in your 30-day follow-up in compliance with the rule. So if you continue to use the paper reportable event form, you also need to fill out a paper 30-day follow-up form, and both should be faxed in for entry into the system. Maxwell asks, will there still be 4,000 character limits in the summary sections? No, all text fields, or I shouldn't say all because there are sometimes exceptions to the rule, but in general, in Evergreen, text fields, comment fields, narrative fields are all 10,000 characters. So you do have more space to document your comments, descriptions, notes, that kind of thing. Jenna asks, when entering the reportable event and selecting which provider to follow up, should the person reporting be the person to follow up like an EIS? If, for example, if a residential provider enters the reportable event, does the same provider need to follow up? So I don't feel super comfortable answering this question, Jenna. I'm going to take this one back. I know there's lots of different scenarios on who should fill out the provider follow-up. So I'll take that question back and we'll post some examples of who should do the provider follow-up on our frequently asked questions page. Steph, I hope you're still here and you're hearing me. Maybe you could jot a note for yourself and we could have your help responding to that question when we update the frequently asked questions. Pete indicates, you mentioned that a reportable event can't be entered unless a death date is entered. For clarification, Pete, death and mortality form cannot be entered unless a reportable event with a category of death has been entered and a date of death has been entered on the person's record. Reportable events can be entered at any time. And so Pete says, currently, I believe the community case manager enters the death date, not the reportable event reporter. Yeah, so the reportable event reporter, data enterer, can still enter the reportable event. The date of death does not need to be on the person record in order to enter a reportable event with a category of reportable event. The only time the date of death needs to be there is when the death and mortality form is being created. Dawn asks if I can explain the correct reporter choice for an agency office person that's entering the report after a direct care staff person provides the information. Also the correct participant choice for the direct care staff. So it sounds like, Dawn, you're indicating that someone within the organization is being a data enterer and not the reporter. So in that case, you would want to under the reporter, you would want to select other and enter the direct care staff person's name, unless that direct care staff person happens to be a contact on the person record. If that's the case, then you could use contact and draw in the direct care staff's information. Similarly, on the witness or participant section, you would want to do the same thing. You'd want to choose other and use the text fields, or again, if they're on the person contact, then you can use that. Lisa asks, will information already in EIS for reportable events, assessments, case notes, etc., all be migrating over to Evergreen, or will we be starting fresh? Excellent question, Lisa. We are migrating all of the EIS data into Evergreen. Not all of it will be migrated into the user interface for all users to see, but all of it will be migrated into our data warehouse for the information services unit to access. We will be migrating, in most cases, 5 years worth of all of the data. So 5 years worth of assessments, 5 years worth of reportable events, 5 years worth of progress notes. So you will be able to search and find all of that data in Evergreen. If you need data that's more than 5 years old, you'll simply need to request a data request to our team, my team, and we will provide that export for you. We are still working on our post-deploy support plan, and how to submit data requests will be part of that plan. Denise asks, if there is a facility event, a fire department responds, for example, is it possible to enter one reportable event for all residents involved, or will we still need to enter them individually? Great question, Denise. I believe you're still going to need to enter those individually, but I don't feel confident to give you that answer. So I will make sure that we take that back to our reportable event subject matter experts and let you know for sure. But because reportable events are entered within the context of a person record, I feel quite confident that you're going to need to enter them individually, unfortunately. Christine asks, is there a manual available for Evergreen? Yeah, so user guide, I think, is what Christine's asking about. So keep your eyes peeled. Early January, we'll be sending you information about the user guide. Kim asks, how long will the learning curve be while we're getting used to this new system? Fabulous question, Kim. I'm sure that that's going to be dependent on each individual user. Some people will feel more comfortable right away. Others will feel a little bit more hesitant. We are providing lots of training in hopes to make the learning curve a lot shorter for people. We are also going to try to provide as many guides and manuals and documentation as possible to help facilitate that. We're also going to make EIS available for people so that you can still log in a read-only fashion, so that if you need to look for data that you're struggling to find in Evergreen, you can quickly log into EIS with your existing role and navigate and find that information if that's faster for you. So we're doing everything that we can to try to make it as short of a learning curve as possible. I am confident that you will all pick the system up quickly once you're in there and playing around in it yourself and testing it out. So once we are able to send you out your sandbox training logins, I would strongly encourage you to get into that test training environment and play around and familiarize yourself with the system. That will also help to reduce the learning curve for you. And so that when we go live on January 16th, you've already been in there, you've already navigated around, you know where things are, and you'll be able to use it a lot more efficiently. But what I can say is that people that have used it, like our release 2 users, they love it. They picked it up quickly. They feel very confident in the system. And so I'm quite certain that all of you will feel the same way once you're in there and using it. Alyssa asks, can training materials be sent to supervisors prior to case managers? Training materials will be posted on our website, Alyssa. They'll also be available from within the Evergreen application itself. We also have a network of change champions that we're using to help facilitate a smooth transition. So we might be able to provide those materials through the Change Champion network as well. But I'll certainly take that back and figure out how we can get those all out to you. Megan asks 2 questions. One, when will PCPs start in Evergreen? January 16th, 2024, Megan. So if you have a person-centered plan that's in progress in EIS, so person-centered planning does get started about 90 days, 60 to 90 days before the actual plan is due. So if you have a PCP that's in progress in Evergreen, that will migrate in its in progress state into Evergreen. So if it's in progress in EIS, it will migrate in the same status, and all the data that you've already captured will migrate into Evergreen in that same status. If it's already completed, it will migrate in a completed state. And then her second question, Megan's second question is, are these technical trainings required to gain access to Evergreen? No, we're not requiring any training for access to Evergreen. However, we do strongly encourage it. It is a true replacement of our EIS system. So there's a lot of functionality there depending on your role. So we would strongly encourage you to participate in training. If you're unable to participate in training, we are recording all the sessions. We will post them to our project website under our training page. So you can go out there and listen to them at a time that's more convenient for you. And we also, again, strongly encourage you, once you receive your login to the training and sandbox environment, to get in there and test around and familiarize yourself. Karen asks, is there a date when ICF section 50 will transition completely to Evergreen? Great question, Karen. So ICF's section 50, I think you guys are currently using our MeCare system. So on January 16th, 2024, you will only use Evergreen for what you're currently using EIS for. So reportable event forms, death and mortality. All of your other program content, I believe, is being captured in MeCare. If that's the case, MeCare will ultimately come into the Evergreen system. We just don't have a date for that deploy yet, but we certainly are going to be we're going to be continuing to enhance Evergreen. We already know that there are some enhancements that we're going to need to make post-deploy for some new program policy changes that are occurring for our existing programs. So we'll be continually enhancing that system, also working out some additional minor bugs that will be there when we go live and that kind of thing. But we'll certainly keep communicating with all of you and letting you know what's on the roadmap and when things are going to be coming. But definitely planning to get MeCare in there at some point. Tara asks, will providers see the case manager follow-up notes? So I think, Tara, you're referring to when the case manager reviews the reportable event, you will still enter a progress note regarding your reportable event follow-up. And no, providers will not be able to see your general progress note that you will enter. So you'll navigate from your notification to the reportable event form. You'll review it. You'll use that confirm option, and then you'll go to the person record and you'll create a general progress note and document your activity for reviewing that progress note. And that progress note will be on the person's record, but other providers will not be able to see that because they will not have access to view the general notes. Heidi asks, who fills out the death and mortality form? The reportable event filer for the death event, or does the community case manager fill that out? I think I got this question before. There are a few different roles that do have access to create the death and mortality form, including the community case manager, the death and mortality reviewer. So those individuals will create that form that have access to it. Someone else asks or states they will still need to put in a reportable event for each individual involved in the incident, helping me respond to that. I'm not sure who that was, but somebody did indicate that you will still need to do an individual reportable event. I'm quite certain that that's the correct answer, but we'll make sure that that's answered correctly out on our website. Dawn asks, how soon will the sandbox be available for practice on the reportable events? Great question, Dawn. The environment is ready now. We just need to do some coordination on assigning you your own person record to use in the system. And that takes a little bit of coordination because we aren't requiring training. And so people are coming to multiple training sessions and we don't want to be assigning out multiple person records. So it just takes a little bit of coordination. So will likely won't be until maybe next week. But if we are able to figure all of that coordination out ahead of time, we certainly will get it out to you earlier, but no later than next week. Karen asks, will our password transfer to EIS and then we change it, or will we need to create it the first time we log in? Great question, Karen. I did not cover that as part of this training. So your EIS credentials will not be transferred over to Evergreen. What will happen on Tuesday, January 16th is once our deploy has been successful, our project team does that deploy over the weekend. So it's from Friday, January 12th to Tuesday morning, January 16th. Once we've successfully completed that deploy, the Evergreen system will send out automated emails to all of the Evergreen users. And those Evergreen users will be based on our existing EIS users. So we will migrate all of the user information over to Evergreen, and you'll have your same role that you currently have in EIS. But what will happen is it will send an automated email to your email address that's on file. This is another reason why it's crucial that your email address is up to date in EIS. So please, if your email address is not up to date in EIS, please make sure that it is by emailing our eissupport.dhhs@maine.gov and getting that updated, because that's where your Evergreen new user email will go to. It will go to that email address that you have on file. And you'll receive that email on Tuesday morning, and it will have a link in there for you to create your own password. So you'll create your Evergreen password from that email, and then it will take you right into the system so you can log in with that username that's assigned to you and your new password. And your username will typically be your first name dot last name. However, if there are multiple individuals in the system that have the same first and last name, then your username might be a little bit different than that. But your username will be sent to you in that new user email as well. Lisa asks, will a member's Evergreen ID number be the same as the ID number in EIS, or will they be assigned a new ID number? Also a great question, Lisa. Unfortunately, they will not be the same ID that they were in EIS. They will get a new Evergreen person record ID. However, we are migrating the EIS person record ID, the people ID from EIS under that person record. So that information is available in the person record under the identifiers section, I believe. Don't quote me on that. We'll make sure that we get it correct on the FAQ, but we are migrating the EIS people ID into the Evergreen person record, but those will not be the same ID numbers. Unfortunately, we weren't able to retain those. Dawn asks, are you going to send us information on the email address our Evergreen login link will come from so that we know that it's a safe link to click on? Great question, Dawn. Yes. We plan to send out a communication in January that will likely let you know that the user guide is available and where you can find that. It will remind you that deploy is coming up, and it will tell you who your new user email is coming from, so that you'll know that it's a safe email to click the link in. And the other thing that it will probably remind you of is that link may go into your spam or trash email. So if you don't see it at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning when you go into your email, you might want to check your junk, spam, trash emails just to make sure that you don't have it before you reach out to ask for it. But we'll add all that to the communication that we send out in January. It looks like those are all the questions that have been put into the question and answer section right now. So unless anybody has any other questions, we certainly can adjourn way early today. Again, apologies for scheduling us for 4 hours. I truly thought that it was going to take much longer than this, and will reduce the upcoming sessions accordingly. But if you have any other questions too, if you think of anything after the fact, please feel free to email those to evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov, and we'll make sure to add those to our frequently asked questions that we post out on our website. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today. It was a pleasure providing this training and answering all of your questions. And I hope you found this helpful, and keep your eyes open for your email with your training sandbox login and assigned record in the next week or so. Everybody have a great afternoon. Stay safe.